Excellencies, distinguished guests, participant, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. Good evening. We are very delighted and pleased to welcome you all to the WCU UNDIP International Webinar entitled Sustainable Development Goals, Political Ecology, and Political Participations, Experiences in Developing Democracies, hosted by a doctoral program of Social Science, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro. My name is Umi. I'm going to be your host for today's seminar. The Honorable Vice Rector for Academic and Student Affairs, Universitas Diponegoro, Professor Budi Setiyono, good evening. The Honorable Dean, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro, Bapak Dr. Hardiwarsono, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thank you very well. The Honorable Vice Dean for Academic and Student Affairs, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro, Bapak Dr. Teguh Yuwono. Good evening, sir. Good evening. The Honorable Vice Dean for Resources.
Umi, good evening. My voice was locked by in the host, so I cannot respond your greeting. But I will say thank you to everybody who joined to this seminar. Actually, Prof. Martadha, Mohamed already with us, and Dr. Fernando from Chile, and also my best friend Andrew Garner is going to join within very short time. Thank you everybody for joining with us. Welcome to FISIP.
Okay, good evening, sir. Thank you.
Yep.
The Honorable Vice Dean for Resources, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Ibu Rizka Putranti, Ph.D. Good evening.
Good evening, Mbak Umi.
Good evening.
Selamat malam.
Selamat malam. The Honorable Head of Department of Politics and Government, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Ibu Dr. Kushandayani. Good evening, Ibu. Okay. The Honorable Head of Doctoral Program of Social Science, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Bapak Yuwanto, Ph.D. Good evening, Bapak.
Good evening, Ms. Umi.
Good evening. The Honorable Professor Dr. Ahmad Martadha Mohamed from Universiti Utara, Malaysia. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Umi.
Good evening.
Thank you, Prof. Martadha.
Yeah, see you again, Pak Teguh.
See you again. Thank you. See you again. Hope everything is okay, Prof.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, Prof. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Pak.
Thank you. The Honorable Dr. Fernando Andres Campos Medina from the University of Chile. Good very morning, maybe in Chile. Good morning, Professor.
Selamat malam. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Selamat malam, Prof. Fernando. What time's now in Chile?
It's 9:15 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
Morning. Yes.
Good time. Morning. It's very, very nice morning. Thank you. Thank you anyway, joining with us.
Greeting from the past for you.
Yeah.
Well,
here is now 7:15 p.m. So I think it's good time for you. Once again, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. The Honorable Professor Andrew Garner from the University of Wyoming, United States of America. Very good morning, Professor Garner.
Andrew Garner may be still in process because it's very early in the morning. Now in Alarm it's about 6 6 a.m. and Western usually not getting up yet. But I think he will be joining in very short time. I will let you know if Andrew already joined with us.
Sure, thank you very much for the information, Pak Teguh. And also the honorable participant, good evening.
Good evening, selamat malam.
Selamat malam. Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to listen to the opening remark. The address will be delivered by Dean, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Dr. Hardiwarsono. Bapak Hardiwarsono, the screen is yours now.
Ya, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
The Honorable Vice Rector of Academic and Student Affairs, Universitas Diponegoro, Professor Budi Setiyono. The Honorable Speaker, Professor Dr. Ahmad Mohamed, Universitas Utara, Malaysia. The Honorable Speaker, Dr. Fernando, Medina-Campus, University of Chile. The Honorable Speaker, Dr. Andrew Garner, University of Wyoming, United States of America. The Honorable Speaker, Yuwanto, MSc Ph.D., Head of Doctoral Program of Social Science of Universitas Diponegoro. Head of Department, Dr. Kushandayani, all lecturers, students, and participants of FISIP UNDIP. On behalf of Faculty of Social and Political Universitas Diponegoro, first of all, I would like to express my great thanks to all participants who joined this World Class University UNDIP International webinar organized by Doctoral Study Program of Social Science, Department of Politics and Government Sciences, Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro. Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro consists of 5 departments, namely Department of Public Administration, Department of Politics and Government Science, Department of Communication Science, Department of Business Administration, and Department of International Relations. These 5 departments offer some study programs started from regular degree, master degree, and Ph.D. degree. All people or students from across the world are warmly welcome to study and share culture while studying here in our faculty. The World Class University UNDIP webinar is a part of internationalization of UNDIP. Therefore, UNDIP then certainly provides more opportunities for people across the world to visit and study here in Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Diponegoro. The faculty is very keen to support and facilitate all the people to have a good academic experiences in the university. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the topic of this international webinar is very interesting, challenging as well as demanding. Democracy is a never-ending topic. Democracy becomes not only important feature of modern state, but also a good system to manage a country. At the end, democracy should result in welfare, as also implemented in Global Sustainable Development Goals organized by United Nations. SDGs are working project not only for developed countries, but also developing countries. Participation is also pivotal to enhance the quality of democracy. Political ecology is also significant to guarantee sustainable development and welfare for our next generations. It is therefore beneficial when this world-class university international webinar invites experts not only from developing countries such as America and developing countries such as Chile, Malaysia, and Indonesia, exchange of experiences from these two different nations will enhance our capacity to develop our nations. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, I do hope all the participants will enjoy discussion and get more benefits for being a part of international webinar. Finally, by giving a say, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, international webinar with the topic Sustainable Development Goals, Political Ecology and Political Participation, Experiences in Developing Democracies is officially open. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Mr. Rid.
For opening the web.
Your voice is not clear.
Okay, sir, let me repeat once again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to listen the keynote speech. The address will be delivered by Rector for Academic and Student Affairs, Universitas Diponegoro, Professor Budi Setiyono. However, due to his tight schedule, the Vice Rector will be deliver his speech through this video. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Budi Setiyono.
Especially for the Master of Ceremony, for nice introduction given to all presenters, including me, honorable deans, vice deans, and also all the key speakers, as well as all participants in this webinar. It is an honor for me to join with you to deliver a speech in this very important webinar this evening. The title that I will present to you is regarding the role of civil society organizations in dealing with corruption during democratic transition in Indonesia, to show how important the social movement conceptualized and also organized by civil society organizations in order to tackle corruption during the transition of democratic process in Indonesia, especially between 1998 until about 2008, probably. So let me show you the presentation that I already made for you. So this is the title, Making a New Democracy Work, CSOs and Their Role in Combating Corruption During Democratic Transition Indonesian Case, to describe how effectively, actually, at the beginning of the Reformasi movement, the work of CSOs on combating corruption in Indonesia, even though later on the movement itself seems weakening up to now. So the movement of CSO is not longer very strong like what happened in the beginning of the Reformasi movement. The content of my presentation will include theoretical conception, and then I will describe a little bit about democratic transition in Indonesia regarding corruption eradication, and then also government response to corruption, and I will conclude with how CSOs step forward in combating corruption during that period of time. The background is that we know everywhere corruption is a very important problems or variable or factors that later on push the overthrow authoritarian regimes across the globe, like what happened in Philippines, for example, in many African countries, as well as, of course, in Indonesia, especially Suharto's regime. But many studies show that new regimes after the collapse of the authoritarian one, meaning the regime that appeared during democratic transition, often also unable to tackle corruption. In some cases, even the situation getting worse. So in that situation, it is a rising question whether can civil society actors lead the fight against corruption. And this conception already conceptualized by World Bank, Egan, Johnston, Shade, and many other authors that basically promoting the role of civil society in leading the fight against corruption. So our question is that can CSOs really effectively lead anti-corruption actions during democratic transition? And if so, what is their contribution? So this is what I want to answer during this presentation. Corruption, as we know, impacts badly on democracy and also development anywhere. This is study conducted by UK8 in 2015, saying in their conclusion that corruption has a negative effect on both inequality and provision of basic services. So it affects poor people disproportionately. So meaning that corruption get everything become worse, especially for the poor. Lack of trust, reduced legitimacy, and lack of confidence in public institutions can be both a cause and an effect of corruption. So it is vice versa. Corruption can lead to lack of public confidence, as well as the same lack of public confidence can lead to corruption. Corruption has a negative effect on domestic investment and tax revenue, meaning that domestic investment and tax revenue will not run proportionately, will not run very well because the disturbance of the corruption. So overall, as I mentioned in the beginning, corruption has very bad and serious impact on development as well as democracy anywhere in the world, I think, especially, of course, for developing democracies. Like what we see in Indonesia, the spread of KKN, corruption, collusions, and nepotism was the main fuel for people power movement during 1990s. So basically, in this picture, we saw that, for example, many demonstrators during that time asking the group of Suhartos and the regime and the crony, so that they want to take Suhartos into the court because of the allegation of corruption, collusion, and nepotism. So basically, in any other country, like in Indonesia as well, corruption badly influence the movement of the people to demand the end of authoritarian regime. And this is the 6 people demand during reformasi movement in Indonesia. One of them is pemberantasan KKN, or abolition of collusion, corruption, and nepotism, among other factors, including the enactment of law supremacy, and then taking Suharto and the crony into the court, amendment of constitution, the abolition of dual function of military and police, as well as the granting local autonomy to local government. So this is the basic 6 of the reformasi demon, and pollution of KKN, corruption, collusion, and nepotism is one of the 6 of the reformasi demon at the time. Because of the collapse of Suharto, due to the demand on corruption abolition, many government or president after the collapse of Suharto taken very serious approaches, at least at formal statement, for countering corruption. For example, Habibie administration that unluckily he only took the office for 2 years. Habibie removed government restriction on the media so that the media will freely criticize the government in many sense, including, of course, taking news on corruption. And then the People Assembly enacted Decree number 11, 1998 concerning anti-corruption, collusion, and nepotism on governmental practices. And then also DPR, or People Representative Body Council, created law number 28, 1999 concerning state executors clean and free of corruption, collusion, and nepotism. Similarly, also created law number 31, 1999 on eradication of corruption criminal. So we actually having very strong start on the effort of combating corruption during that time. Similarly, during President Abdurrahman Wahid in 1999 to 2002, there are also a number of government counter-corruption approaches being made. For example, Presidential Decree number 44, 2000 for the establishment of Commission of National Ombudsman to oversee the bureaucracy as well as general state arrangement and also state institution business. And then there also during Abdurrahman Wahid, there was establishment of United Team for Corruption Eradication, TGPTPK, under Attorney General. And then the President also issued the Decree number 18, 2000 on the procedure of government procurement, making better and cleaner procurement process. The President also issued Government Regulation number 71, 2000 concerning mechanism of public participation in corruption eradication and prevention. And then also he, with the DPR, of course, issued law number 28, 1999 for the establishment of Commission of Investigation of the Wealth of the State Officials, or KPKPN, and later on this one become the KPK, or Commission on Corruption Eradication. And then after Abdurrahman Wahid, during Megawati presidential period in 2002 and 2004, she during her period also there are quite a number of counter-corruption approaches. For example, law number 15, 2002 on anti-money laundering, which led to the establishment of the Center for Financial Transactions Reporting and Analysis, PPATK. And then also during her presidency, there is also law number 30, 2002 for the establishment of the Corruption Eradication Commission, or KPK, and Special Court for Corruption Criminal Acts. There was also law number 22, 2004 being formed for the establishment of judicial commissions, which is appointed to oversee the performance of judges. And then later on, during Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's presidency, during 2004, especially until 2009, there is Presidential Instruction number 5, 2004 on the acceleration of corruption eradication, And then Presidential Decree number 11, 2005 for the establishment of the Coordination Team for Corruption Eradication, Tim Task Tipikor, to replace TGP, TPK, and maximize its function. And then in 2006, Indonesia ratified the United Nations Convention Against Corruption by the Law number 7, 2006. And then also Law on Witness Protection was also created during SBY presidency. And also similarly during the current president, Jokowi, but probably the transition of democracy already being accomplished by Indonesia. So I don't mention the policy being taken by Joko Widodo. But even though the government seems very hard in combating corruption, but the records of corruption remains high in almost every assessment. So, for example, this is from the record of CPI, Corruption Perception Index, maintained by Transparency International, showing that the record of corruption during authoritarian period and democratic period, it is not quite far away. Even in the beginning of the period, the record seems getting worse. For example, in 1997, the record of CPI already recorded 2.7, but in 1999, the record became 1.7, meaning one level down. Yeah, as well as in 2000, and then 2001 slightly increased to up to 1.9, and then 2002 still remained the same until 2003, and then 2004. This is the period that I mentioned CSOs work started to bear fruit. There are a lot of battle being mobilized by CSO. The record of CPI getting better and better. 2.2, then 2.0, then 2.2, and then 2.4 in 2006, and then decline again 2.3 in 2007, and then 2.6 in 2008, and up to now the number keep increasing. In order to analyze why government fails in combating corruption, at least I found four variables that making government ineffective in dealing with corruption. First is that the democratic transition landscape are not always resistant to the influence of the system and political configuration being set up by authoritarian regime. This is conclusion from study conducted by the World Bank that the landscape of political situation in Indonesia actually quite similar to what being configured by Suharto's regime. So in that sense, even though the demand for abolition of corruption, collusion, nepotism take place very strongly, but because of that political configuration, making the demand cannot take place effectively, so that the actors of corrupt practices basically still in that position, and also in still maintaining their practices in the government businesses. Secondly, democratic transition was not followed by massive transformation of personnel in the bureaucracy, judiciary, or military, or a large-scale redistribution of power in the business sector. This is in line with the first conclusion from the study conducted by the World Bank, that basically there are no massive transformation of personnel in every sector of the government, so that making them quite have the freedom for practicing corruption, even though the regime was changed already. Thirdly, democratization created political split, polarization, and social disorder, making those who concerned with corruption cannot do much, because of the political split, polarization, disputes, and social disorder. So this environment created opportunity for the culprit for taking advantage, making self-enrichment without being worried and threatened by law enforcement, for example. Basically, law enforcement did not work during that time. And then, fourthly, citizens have little incentive to trust the political and judicial system and have little experience in influencing public policy. So, because more than 32 years, basically, public have no experience on dealing with government monitoring, for example, or pushing the government for doing good public policy implementation, so that the government basically is still running their business without much control from the public. So this is also created fertile environment for the practice of corruption. Furthermore, the government's failure also correlates with the division on an incomplete democratic consolidation, namely ineffectual of judicial institutions because they are poorly funded, ill-equipped, and also encircled with corruption themselves. And then also shortcomings, parliamentary supervision. Most politicians have lacked formal experience of government monitoring, as they are just starting to learn their new job, and even they don't know how actually the formal procedure for demanding accountability of government officials in certain sessions of meeting. So in that sense, it is in the hand of the CSO who actually people can rely on combating corruption. And CSO, we know that it is an organization that often defined as private, non-profit, voluntary, grassroots organization that have a concern to make a better life for the public and counterbalance the state. So from the definition itself, the function of the CSO, one to the other is to counterbalance the state. So they are actually they are very, by nature they are can be utilized by the public for counterbalance the state. And financially, they may rely either on fundraising vendors, local donations, foreign aid, or in some cases, government support. So because of the continuing of the corruption in Indonesia during democratic transition, since 1998, CSOs with a focused work on anti-corruption emerged at national, provincial, and even district level. They undertake two levels of work. First, at strategic level, doing advocacy for reform agenda and policy changes. And at the second level, they demanding government, or they organize government monitoring and legal actions against corruptors or against government officials who committed in corruption. This is the road of CSO's involvement, basically, as we mentioned earlier. There is a failure of the state in delivering democratic outcomes as the first variable who that influenced the rise of the involvement of CSOs. There is also the fact of persistence and proliferation of corruption during democratic transition and negligence of public interest by the government during that time. So there's three variables causes the rise of CSOs fight against corruption at two levels, strategic level, as well as at the practical ground for government monitoring. The actions at strategic level consist of several important action. For example, the CSO contributed to the amendment of Constitution as a vital key for reducing the potential of power abuse and KKN, corruption, collusion, and nepotism. So they work very hard in pushing the DPR, the People Representative Body, the People Representative Council, for making amendment of Constitution so that the Constitution can provide a strong basis for power abuse abolition. Secondly, the CSO also initiated and contributed to the formulation of various anti-corruption regulations and policies. As we mentioned during the transition, the presidential transition, there are a lot of regulation being made that the regulation basically are product of CSO's movement and demand to DPR, to People Representative Council, to make that kind of anti-corruption regulations and laws. And then CSOs also contributed to the establishment of TGP-TPK, Anti-Corruption Coordinating Team, during Abdurrahman Wahid presidency, so that they even also a number of CSOs leaders become the member of TGP-TPK during that time. The CSO also endorsed the establishment of Anti-Corruption Commission or KPK and Special Court for Corruption during Megawati's presidency. A number of CSO activists also become the commissioner of the KPK later on. CSO also initiated and participated on the formulation of Witness and Whistle Protection Act, even the initiation or the original version of the regulation of the law coming from CSOs, and the formulation of this Whistleblower Protection Act actually coming from discussion organized by a number of prominent CSOs, including, for example, Indonesian Corruption Watch, Indonesian Transparency Community, as well as other prominent CSOs in Indonesia. The CSOs also actively conducted surveys and analysis on corruption. There are a lot of reports on analysis on corruption in certain number of sectors, including, for example, forestry corruption, fishery corruption, public service corruption, health sector corruption, education sector corruption, etc. And then finally, CSOs also took very strong participation in endorsing the government, the UNCAC, during Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's presidency. So that various number of actions taken by CSO at strategic level that produces a number of strategic laws and also policies, programs, as well as anti-corruption institutions that later on functioning for the battle against corruption in Indonesia. Meanwhile, the actions at practical level also consist a number of actions, including, for example, budget monitoring. CSOs everywhere at national, provincial, and also regional level, they took budget monitoring very strictly in order to make sure the budget is formulated and implemented properly by the government. And then when they found any misusing of the budget and also corrupt practices based on the misappropriation of government budget, then the CSO basically often conducted demonstrations and asking law enforcement, especially KPK, to take action against that kind of bad practices. And then also the CSOs took oversighting public services anywhere and reported maladministration oftenly, so that the government at any level and any sector has to put attention to the oversight from the NGOs. The CSOs also taking in revealing corruption cases and bring corruptors or corrupt officials to justice, so that there are a lot of cases accomplished by CSO in this case, and then making some government officials have to stay at the jail. Yeah. And then the CSOs also organizing the provision of anti-corruption awards. There are a number of prominent CSOs doing this kind of celebration, providing awards for those being considered as the significant significant figures who take part in the battle against corruption. Later on, the CSOs also undertaking anti-corruption trainings and public awareness promotions by a number of programs, including supporting schools and universities in developing curriculum for making anti-corruption subject teaching. Because of that kind of works, there are a lot of achievement being achieved by CSOs. For example, under the initiative and contribution of CSOs, more than 24 anti-corruption laws and regulations have been made since 2000. And there are quite a number of laws and also regulations. And then also under initiative and endorsement from CSOs, some anti-corruption bodies were established, including, for example, KPK, Commission for Eradication Corruption, that now successfully taking many government officials into the court because the allegation of corruption. And then also PPATK, Center for Financial Transactions Reporting and Analysis, KON, Commission on National Ombudsman, KPPU, Commission for Supervisory Business Competition, KY, Judicial Commission, KK, Attorney General Commission, and also Kompolnas or National Police Commission. Due to CSO's work, there are more, also 750 corruption cases were revealed and thousands of the suspects were jailed during the democratic transition period. This is the examples of corruption cases, huge corruption cases that, revealed, monitored by CSOs that also lead to the execution of the actors of the corruption, including helicopter gate in Aceh, for example, 2002, revealed by CSOs NIM, SAMAK, Solidaritas Masyarakat Anti Korupsi, and SORAK. I didn't remember the abbreviation. And then also KPU budget scandal in 2005, corruption on Dana Abadi Umat, Department of Religious Affairs in 2004, PLBI, big corruption cases, 2000 by Indonesian Corruption Watch, corruption on Lampung Disaster Fund, 2003, misappropriation regarding West Sumatra provincial government budget, corruption on PT Bank and DB, corruption case on Mentawai District Secretary, revealed by local NGOs over there, and then also corruption regarding the Bestari Foundation scandal on Pontianak District Council, and then the Forest Resource Provision Fund and Reforestation Fund in several districts and provinces, and in 2004 by Konstan or Koalisi Ornop untuk Kelestarian Hutan. So there are quite other corruption cases being revealed by CSOs, but these are the most prominent one, but actually probably more than 100 cases being revealed by CSOs around Indonesian wide. But even though there are significant contributions from CSOs in dealing with corruption in Indonesia, CSOs themselves still facing with a number of problems. For example, regarding weak organizational capacity, in terms of financial limitations, poor of technical skills, problem of recruitment for new activists, etc. So they actually very, badly in the way they can recruit the new activists. Only few activists, only few people can have, dare to be CSOs activists, because they have to face with a number of risks being targeted by criminals when they took action against corruption. And then also the CSOs themselves are vulnerable of internal conflicts. There are quite competition between activists to get some prominent actions and also publications, so that sometimes it's also created disturbance for themselves, for their activities being made. And then the weakness also related to the fake internal and external accountability. In some cases, there are a number of NGOs who actually take advantage and benefit for short-term, purposes financially, so that they basically has no accountability. They have no accountability in using whatever in their hand, and even some bad NGOs making the issue of corruption for robbing government officials, for example. It is quite a number of examples being taken by media. The CSO also relatively fail in generating constant popular support because of that kind of weaknesses. The CSO cannot maintain public support in a stable way. Sometimes the support was very strong, but not at the other time, because probably also the issue of accountability, people didn't put their trust anymore to certain NGOs. And then eventually the stamina of the CSOs in combating corruption become weakening. So in today's current situation, this is happening actually. The stamina of the CSOs seem already very weak, and government position becomes stronger and stronger, so that they can continue the practice of corruption. So in order to overcome that kind of weaknesses, CSOs actually try the best for maintaining their stamina and their activities. Of course, not all NGOs. We say, generally speaking, in the NGO sector or the civil society sector, they try to take this kind of efforts. For example, first, that they try to make consolidation with peer organizations in taking a number of action, and also collaborated with professional associations, for example, in analyzing certain cases, corruption cases. If they don't have any expertise in that kind of sector, then they demand or ask help from professional associations to do so. And then also they collaborated with reform minds as the support from internal governmental body. For example, they often collaborated with whistleblower in order to open or disclose certain corruption cases. NGOs also strongly work with universities and students in certain ways and methods. I myself often working with them and provide advices for the way they maintain their function in monitoring the government. Of course, there's also CSOs also work with media and donor institutions in order to supplement their, gap and weaknesses. As concluding remarks, I would say that the CSO's role in Indonesia has been very significant in terms of both preventive and curative measure in curbing corruption because of the action already taken, as I mentioned earlier. And they have a potential to stimulate successful democratic consolidation. And yet their stable work is still in question, whether they can sustain their work or they will become weaker and weaker. And in that sense, assistance to develop organizational capacity will be a vital factor for their continuing action in dealing with corruption. So that's all probably what I can present it to you in this webinar. I hope that you can enjoy the further discussion with other keynote speakers and also making good discussion and networking later on to make further collaboration. Thank you very much for the opportunity and a very good evening. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Professor Budi, for the presentations. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Vice Rector for Academic and Student Affairs, Universitas Diponegoro, about CSO against corruptions. Excellencies, participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we're moving to our main agenda, that is WCU UNDIP International Webinar entitled Sustainable Development Goals, Political Ecology and Political Participations, Experiences in Developing Democracy. The discussion will be led and moderated by the Honorable Mr. Dzunuwanus Ghulam. He is a lecturer at Department of Politics and Government Sciences. Are you ready, sir?
Oh yeah, thank you, Baumi.
So the screen is yours now.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good evening. Since our webinar covers different times and different parts of the world, my name is Ghulam, as introduced by Mbak Umi. I'm from the Department of Politics and Government Universitas Diponegoro, and I will be responsible for hosting this webinar today. We have various topic according to the sustainable development goals, range from environmentals and SDGs itself, and also political arena such as the political movement and also election. Just before we start the session, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have 4 speakers, and the first we have Dr. Fernando Medina-Campus from University of Chile. In Chile, I think it's already morning there. Good morning, Dr. Fernando. Yeah, he is the assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and focus in sociology in environmental sociology. And in 2008, I think Dr. Fernando has joined research with the Universitas Diponegoro. So hopefully in the future, we can establish another joint research. And the second one, we have Professor Dr. Ahmad Martadha Mohamed from Universiti Utara, Malaysia. His research mostly on bureaucracy and public sector. And we can learn from Malaysia how to deal with the challenge of SDGs in the presentation that will be given by Professor Martadha. And the third, we have Dr. Yuwanto. Dr. Yuwanto is the head of doctoral program of social science, Universitas Diponegoro. His research mostly on comparative politics and also foreign policy. And the last but not least, we have Dr. Garner from University of Wyoming. Good morning, Dr. Garner.
Selamat pagi.
Selamat pagi. Thank you for, we are glad to have you here. Dr. Garner is an associate professor and also graduate studies director in the School of Politics, Public Affairs, and International Studies, University of Wyoming, United States. And he also have some joint research with us in Universitas Diponegoro. Sadly, during this pandemic, he cannot join to become a visiting professor in Universitas Diponegoro. So for the presenter, I think there will be 20 minutes of presentation for each speaker. And at the end of the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. And for the participant who'd like to posing the question, you may write down to the chat room, or at the time you can raise your hand and directly ask to the speaker. First, we welcome Dr. Fernando Medina-Campus. He will presenting about environmental court in Chile. And for Dr. Fernando, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I don't know if I can share like a PowerPoint. I'll share the screen, or you
can do it.
Yeah,
I can do it.
Yeah, you can do it. Perfect. Because you are co-host now.
Yeah, perfect. Then I do it. Yeah. Can you tell me if you can see the slide?
Yes, we can see
clearly.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very glad to share with you. I'm gonna talk about research that we conduct and that we are continuing researching in Chile. It's about a part of our socio-environmental institution. This is regarding the environmental courts. And our question was whether the environmental courts can strengthening or weakening the environmental institution and the relation in relation with society. Okay. The argument for us is quite clear. In regard to institution and implementation of institutional reforms, we have like kind of two positions. One is the idea like has to do with the resource course, that when you have an economy that's built on natural resources, there are like less incentive on when these resources, as Chile, also like Indonesia, has like a very extractive economy, there are less incentive to make institutional reform, and that's why you could have like a slowness in the implementation of institutions that regulate, for example, in this case, the relation between society and nature. This would be one idea, and the other explanation is the opposite. It's like the idea of modernization. It's like institutional reform are like improvement in the performance of the institution. Okay, in the case of Chile, we see that both of these explanations are not quite good to explain our model of transformation, and we kind of propose this heuristic interpretation about the idea of institutional colonization. It's like we create institution. In this way, we cannot see that it's kind of a slowness in the institution. We create the institution, but the institutional are not totally like an improvement, because in the enactment of the institution, in the performance of the institution, what we see is like power actors become they kind of start to rule, or like the institutional perform more in the idea or the interest of some groups than more in the interest of some groups and less in the interest of others. Okay. In these ways, our case of study is the environmental courts. We follow the performance in two moments, in the 2013 until 2017, and also like in the 2015 and the 2019. The environmental courts in Chile, then I'm gonna explain a bit better, they had been enacted around the 2013. It's like they became from a modification in our institution that is from the 2010, but their implementation, the real one, is around the 2013. They are very new as part of our institution. Okay, we think that the environmental court are very relevant as part of the environmental, socio-environmental democracy, because for one side, on one hand, they grant a space for non-governmental actors, for local communities to access to environmental justice. This is part of their constitution and their functions, okay? But on the other side, they also represent a form of like the private sector can claim against the state for administrative decisions in this idea of an excessive judicialization, or like an excessive intervention of the state in private affairs. Okay, in this way, the environmental court, they for the mandatory disposition, they should take these two tasks. Okay, and that's why we think like they are a very relevant kind of institution to see how they really perform. Okay, here is like I'm not I bring, because I wanted to make sense of what we are talking when we when I say extractive industry or extractive economy in Chile, and I bring the example of the mining industry. The research conducted about the environmental court is not only, of course, dealing with conflict around the mining industry. It's a general, it's more a general, they rule all situations, but I wanted to make an idea to you how what we are talking about. Okay, this is a picture of a photo from the Atacama Desert. The copper mine in Chile is mostly located in the Atacama Desert, and also like in the Andes mountain. In this part, in the very north of Chile, of the long country that is long and narrow country that is Chile. Okay, I think until a few years ago, like the biggest mines, open pit mines, were located in the Atacama Desert. They are our principal source of revenues. I think around 40% of the GDP in the 2000s were connected to mining industry. Nowadays is less. It's like around 20%. And there is, here's very important, there is a super cycle they call of the copper price around the 2000 and 2008, where the price of the copper rise from $1 to $4.6 the pound. Okay, and this is very important because in this time the projects, the minings, they were accelerated. There were many projects in this decade, and also like our production was increasing. In the other, as I said before, there are like two ways to understand in this context that is about an extractive economy. We have two main avenues to understand the institutional framework, the improvement of the institution. One is like to say like resource cost is like there is like a less incentive when the prices of the raw material are high. There are like less incentive to create new institutions or to make reforms. And on the other side, there is this idea of ecological modernization that is very important institution because they can generate technical and productive changes or like support this. As I said before, no one then really explained what is going on in our country, and we have this other like alternative idea. Why we have this alternative idea is because like in the two moments that the mining industry grew the most, that is the last decade of the 19th century, of the 19 years, and the first decade of the 2010, is exactly the same time where we have the biggest transformation in our institutional framework. One is the 1994 Environmental Impact Assessment System, that is the creation of the National Commission of Environment, and in the 2010 is the creation of the Ministry of Environment with these three other like institutions, that is the Superintendency of Environment, the Environmental Court, and the National Service of Biodiversity and Protected Areas. These improvements are connected with the biggest waves of growing in the extractive industry, and mining is a very good example. Okay, and now what is the main point of the presentation? It's like talk about how the environmental courts they act. From one side, if you see who uses the environmental courts, it is very interesting to see that project holders and private individuals, they came with legal claim in more than the 60% of the total cases that we analyze. That is very high if we observe, for example, grassroots organization or indigenous community that together they only represent around the 15% of the claims. Okay. For example, social environmental organization, they came only around 3% of the cases. City councils, only around 4%, and all the other categories, they represent other project holders. That it can be state companies, can be other like private companies. But this is very interesting. It's like when we see who uses the environmental courts, who kind of make more claims, and in this way propose the subjects to the environmental court, we see that in general there are project holders and not a local community. What would be that would be kind of in the opposition of this idea, like the environmental court, the common sense about the environmental court, that is a space for the local community to access to the environmental justice. Okay. Then another like data that we could collect was what does the users do at the environmental courts? And here I will focus in two different kind of complaint. One are the claims and the other are demands. When we say, this is a brief explanation, in our justice system or like legal system, demands are focused in environmental damage, are substantive complaint. It's like, for example, with when a local community go to the environmental court and said, you know, came a company to make an exploration for a mining project, and they pollute the river that was close to the area, or the particular material that they produce due to the trucks and explosion or whatever is too high. These are demands, okay? But claims are when they allegate is because of the procedure. It's, for example, when a company said, like, you know, the state make a fine to my project because of an environmental problem, but this is not legal because there was not, they should, I don't know, give me a letter 1 week ago and wait, I don't know, 2 months to do something, and they did it in a different time, something like that. It's a legal complaint. It's a formal complaint about the procedure. Okay, and when we see this data, we observe that claims are the most important task that the environmental court regulate, while demands that are the protection, for example, of the environment, are very low in comparison. And what happened when we cross these two information? What happened when we see which actor comes to the environmental courts, and from the other side, what they do in the environmental court? When we see the project holder, that are the companies, you see that they demand very low, only in 6 cases. These data are from the 2015 to 2019. 6 times, while they claim almost 100 times. Natural persons that are all other private persons that they have projects, they do it more or less in the same proportion, only 6 times demands and more than 60 claims. While organization of the civil society or unions, they go 2 times with demands and 40 times or more than 40 times with claim. This is very interesting because what it says is like, okay, project holder or natural person connected with projects, they go mostly the time to make claims about procedure, about fails in the procedure of the environmental institution. They go to the court to say that the procedures have problems and that's why they are invalid. But from the other side, we see that organization of the civil society start to do the same, start to see that the complaints because of demands or because of a substantive environmental problem, yeah, they cannot make these cases, they start to be less, they see less possibilities of success in this arena, and they also start to go and claim about legal procedure. And in this way, it's like we start to see like the one important role of the environmental court in their born as institution, in their creation as institution, that was the access to environmental justice and the protection of the environment, is start to be like very less relevant as part of the action of the environmental courts. And one brief data before I close is like how then the environmental court resolve a court the user, because what we see is like actors, okay, going to the environmental court, but we didn't say anything about what at the end the environmental court decide. In Chile, in the period of 2013 to 2017, there was like 106 court decisions made by the environmental courts. There are many other decisions that escalate to a higher level, yeah. Of this 106, 68 go and appeal to a higher court. This means like at the end, the environmental court decide over these cases, but the actors, they move it to a higher level, for example, to the Supreme Court. But then if we see 21 decisions made that by the environmental court in these 3 years, that actually they were enacted, we observed that 18 were in favor of the project holders. 5 were in favor of natural persons that are also connected with project. Then it's like around 23 decision in favor of project, and only 4 times the decision support community position in defense of the environment or in defense of the same communities. Okay, and then like final remarks, I think this idea, I think is very interesting for democracy and also for analyze the institutional transformation in countries, and especially in what many people call as extractive industries, extractive economies. I think it's very important to observe that the creation of an institution is neither something good or something bad per se, in essence, but it's more important to see how the institution really act and how the institution perform in a daily basis. In this way, we assume and we want to pursue this concept further, the idea of institutional colonization, the idea of like some actors, they start to use more the institution and they start to make that the institution move the action to a specific, for example, in the case that I show, more to the idea of claims, you know, and also like the institution, due to this actor, they came more, and also they make a specific use of the institution. They also, then the institution start to make more cases in favor of this group. This is an important idea, or like they are like the basis to talk about the idea of institutional colonization. It's like the institutions are important in the way that they are used and they deliver like a response to the society. They are not only important in paper or like important in the enactment. For me, it's good the idea of like the law, and we saw in the last presentation about the key speaker about corruption. It's not so. It's very important, of course, that the law is enacted, but once the law is enacted, then we need to continue observing how the institutional performs and if they fulfill the society expectation about the institution. And this was the idea of make the research about the environmental court. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fernando, for your clear and interesting presentation. And as we know, we learn about the importance of Hello.
Any problem, Ghulam?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fernando, for your clear and interesting presentation. That's why we share that institutional is important, but moreover, after it works, we have to ensure that it brings the benefit to any kind of society. And Dr. Fernando will join us until maybe next 1 hour because he have a very important meeting. So if you like to ask the question, and actually there is a participant that already asked to the chat room to Dr. Fernando. So please, you can use the chat room or directly chat to Dr. Fernando. Now we continue to the second presenter. We'll have Professor Dr. Ahmad Martadha Mohamed, and he will presenting about the Malaysia of facing the challenge of achieving sustainable development goals. Professor Martadha, the screen is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon.
Waalaikumsalam, Prof.
Thank you, Pak Ghulam, first of all, the moderator, Pak Teguh, the person who personally invited me to become part of the conference for this afternoon, all the distinguished speakers, all the secretariat, and ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to take this opportunity to express my deepest appreciation to Pak Teguh and all the secretariat for giving me the opportunity to share some of my ideas, in regard to sustainable development goal, and hopefully we can learn something from the case of Malaysia and try to work together in order to improve and better the world that we live in today. So without further ado, let me start my presentation. Okay, the title of my presentation today is Malaysia Facing the Challenges of Achieving SDG Goal. Okay, I'll be talking about briefly on SDG governance and assessment of SDG goals, and then before I wrap up the session, I will talk about some of the issues and challenges facing Malaysia in regard to achieving SDG goals and the way forward. I think the theme of the conference is very, very appropriate because with the pandemic that all the countries are facing right now, there have to be some kind of challenges and setbacks, for all countries in regard to making sure that every country is on the right track to achieve SDG goals. I'm sure we have a lot of, all government leaders have a lot of meeting before or prior to COVID-19 pandemic. All countries, I'm sure, are putting a lot of efforts to ensure that every country is on the right track to achieve SDGs. And I think similar to Indonesia or Chile or America or other countries in the world, all of us are signatories of the United Nations. So all of us are very concerned about achieving SDGs. So with the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of countries have to face the reality, have to make sure that we put forward our priorities, what is right, what is probably need to be put on hold. And I'm sure taking this into consideration, we have to accept the fact that some of the goals that we have been lining up might not be able to be achieved within the time frame, and we have to maneuver to make sure that whatever issues that we are facing now will have to be dealt with urgently and immediately. However, despite all the issues, crisis that we have gone through, especially in regard to pandemic COVID-19, we have to look forward, because this is something which is very, very important. It's not only for the current generation, it is for the future generation. So that's why we have to, I think I really appreciate the theme of the conference to highlight the issue of SDGs, because this is something for our future generation to take note and to make sure that they also pay attention, because this will be something that they will cherish and experience in the future. So let's look at what is actually SDGs, which was very different from Millennium Development Goals that we already talked about last time. If you were to look at the goals of MDG were not very comprehensive. There were only 8 goals. Compared to SDG, we have 17 goals and 169 targets, 244 indicators. And the scope is more wider. It's more comprehensive in nature compared to MDGs. And it is not only in terms of micro, but also macro. So the target is that nobody will be left behind when government implements SDG. And what's the trade-off? Rather than focusing on individual goals, with SDG, it is interconnected and cross-cutting goals. And in regard to Malaysia, Now we have involved close to 70 government agencies that are responsible in maintaining and making sure that the goals can be achieved within the time frame. So that's basically what SDG is about. So what is the position of our country? In fact, Malaysia has taken a strong commitment. We are also part of the signatories of Sustainable Development Summit, New York in 25th of September 2015. Now we have fully fledged our commitment to uphold our need that we wanted to make sure that we are also part of all countries that will strive hard to achieve SDGs. So what did we do? We formed SDG Council, starting with phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And also we put up a steering committee chaired by Deputy General of Economic Planning Unit, and also a lot of members from government as well as private agencies. And we have also formed 5 working committees, what we call technical committee based on clusters. And these are all our effort to ensure that Malaysia is moving towards the right track to ensure the successful implementation of SDGs. So, of course, when we are talking about SDG, it is something that involve a lot of agencies, not only in the public sector, but also in the private sector. And it is not something that can be taken lightly. It involves total coordination, total cooperation from government sectors, from private sector, and also from NGOs. So therefore, to be able to achieve the SDGs that were being planned by the year 2030, so we have to work very, very hard. And I'm sure, even though SDG has only been in implementation for 4 years, starting from 2016, but we have done a lot and we have seen a lot of improvement. However, like what I discussed earlier, this pandemic, COVID-19 crisis has slowed our efforts a little bit, but nonetheless, we are still making sure whatever the government has planned will be going ahead, and trying to make sure that despite all the setbacks and all the problems and challenges, government will strive very hard to put Malaysia on the right track. So this is basically a recap of what is SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals, 169 target, 244 indicators. And these are some of the minor details of that. And these are some of the information. Let me just recap what are the goals. There are 17 goals. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, which is something that I will be focusing on tonight, clean and water, sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, reduce inequality is also something that I will also focus, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, climate action, life below water, life online, peace and justice, and strong institution. Based upon our keynote speaker earlier, talk about the issue of corruption, and this is also something which is very, very critical also in our country, and partnership to achieve the goal. So these are basically the 17 SDG goals that every country tries very hard to achieve. So let's look at the mapping of SDG, because whatever we do in Malaysia, it is always based on the Malaysian plan. Now we are going into the 12th plan, but currently we are in the 11th Malaysian plan, and therefore all the strategies of SDGs are being framed based upon the framework of 11 Malaysian plan. For example, we have set up 7 pillars within these 17 goals, And these pillars include enhancing inclusiveness. This is something that I will be talking about. Inclusivity towards an equitable society, improving well-being for all, accelerating human capital development, pursuing green growth, strengthening infrastructure, re-engineering economic growth. So these are some of the pillars, based upon some of the issues. I'll try to speed up a little bit. Okay, improving inclusive development. This is very, very important because this is something that has taken a lot of efforts. And in fact, with the pandemic that is going on right now, a lot of issues have to be dealt with, especially in regard to making sure that we try to strive hard to focus on inclusivity towards an equitable society. So you can see here, improving overall income inequality, uplifting the below 40 household towards a middle class society, empowering communities for productive and prosperous society, transforming rural areas to uplift well-being of rural communities, accelerating regional growth for better geographical balance. So these are some of the things that government has done, and unfortunately, with the pandemic that is wrecking the economy, not only in Malaysia but all over the world, government has taken a bad step in terms providing a lot more programs, giving a lot more subsidies to those who are badly affected by this COVID-19 crisis. And I'm sure similar to a lot of countries in the world, poor people are normally the groups that are hardest hit by this pandemic, and therefore government has taken a lot of steps, introduced a lot of programs, providing a lot of subsidies to ensure that these groups will be given undue attention, especially in regard to making sure they have enough food, enough money to continue living with whatever condition that they are experiencing right now. Okay, and let's also another important aspect that is also part of the focus of SDG is women empowerment. And I'm very glad that for the past 30 years, Malaysia has made a tremendous progress in making sure that we strive to provide equal opportunity, for women as well as for men. And in fact, our statistics has shown that Malaysia Gender Gap Index, based upon 2018 data, is roughly 0.711. So this is quite significant. And our position has indeed improved from the last time. And in terms of labor force participation for women as well as for men, they are about equal. Salary wise, they are also about equal. And professional and technical positions, roughly, even though women is still a little bit lagging behind, 44.3 compared to 55, but they have made tremendous steps. A lot of important positions in the government are filled in with a lot of women. And in terms of education attainment, we have seen similar achievement between men and women, primary, secondary, and tertiary education. The only thing that probably needs to be done is political empowerment. I think this is something that even leaders in the country, are quite aware. And for the past few years, this is, I think, one of the main agendas that have been brought forward, not only by political leaders, but also by non-governmental organizations, but also people on the ground who feel that more is needed to be done to provide more opportunities for women, especially to engage and be active in politics. So let's look at this is one of the challenges in democratic accountability and legitimacy in our country, to ensure that we have more women representation in parliament. As of right now, representation of parliament among women is not up to the numbers that we expect it to be. I'm sure Malaysia still needs to do more, because if we were to look at the rank of countries throughout the world, we are still way behind in terms of women's representation in parliament. So the data from 2018 shows that we are still 156 ranking out of 190 countries. So a lot more need to be done in regard to increasing women's representation in parliament. And so, in fact, in ASEAN, we are also last in ASEAN compared to other ASEAN countries. Currently, we have, I think the numbers are probably higher. This was based upon last year's data, but the existing data shows we have, I think, around 5 or 6 women ministers. But whatever it is, this is still one of the issues that need to be addressed. I'm sure government is paying attention to it, and more need to be done. And one of the recommendations that have been put forward is to have a quota system like what is taking place in Indonesia. In Indonesia, political parties have a quota system before going into election. They have to have a certain number of women to become representative in the election. So probably this is something that need to be looked upon in the future. And we have also need to amend some of the constitution, for example, providing 30% quota for women in parliament. So I'm sure this will be looked upon carefully later. Additional seat in state assemblies, or even another idea by certain quarters to have a proportional representation. Then that would allow more women to be represented in parliament. Now, similar to women, we also have very few members of parliament from youth. So which is very significant, because now is the age of the younger generation. And in fact, a lot of European countries, have given opportunities to young leaders to become, some of them have become ministers, some of them have become, like Prime Ministers of Canada is still in the 40s, Prime Minister of New Zealand still young. A lot of countries have given opportunities for youth, and in fact, youth contributes to 1.2 billion who are in the age of 15 to 24. So for us to enhance our democratic legitimacy, of course, we need to allow more youth representation in parliament. So currently, youth only make up around 2% of world MPs. 26% of world MPs are under 45, where if you were to look at countries like Ecuador, Finland, Norway, Sweden, they have more than 10% of MPs under the age of 30. So various minimum age to run office is still being implemented in majority of the countries. So in fact, if we were to look at statistics, MPs under 30 in parliament, Bhutan has 9.1, Netherlands, Spain, Myanmar, MPs under 45, Asia is number 9, MPs under 45 in chambers, ASEAN is still number 8. So in regard to youth representation, this is also something that need to be addressed, because after all, if we want to have an egalitarian society, a society that is both equal, we need to have a woman and youth representation in parliament. This is also part of the agendas of a sustainable development goal. So let's look at the well-being of rakyat also. Well-being of our citizen is something which is very critical, especially in times of COVID-19 crisis. So, if we were to look at what is taking place in America, I'm sure by now you have heard how many poor people have died. Majority of people who died in America, basically they were from poor, lower class income categories of group. So similar to other countries also, Malaysia is also facing a scenario like that, where those who are badly affected during this pandemic is mostly people who live in the rural areas, people who are poor, people who cannot afford to go and get medical treatment, because sometimes medical treatment is very costly, and therefore access to universal healthcare is something that is becoming a concern for a lot of people. And the other aspect that I want to talk about is providing adequate, quality and affordable housing to poor, low and middle income households. This is a critical issue in our country right now. Let's show the statistic here. In a lot of states in our country, medium monthly household income is 5,228 ringgit. So median annual household income is 62,000. Medium house price, is 298,000. So median multiple 3 price 188. So if you look at, this is critical. If you look at the affordability index, it shows here that all type of housing can be considered unaffordable for majority of the people. So this is a very serious concern, and that's why I said here issues of housing supply, affordability and home ownership have been in focus of late. Majority new home prices falling just within the limit or above the range of affordability. So what we have now, the country is facing abundance of properties. 32,810 units of properties are overhang units, are completed but cannot be sold. And most of them are condominiums and apartments. And why? Because as the income of citizens are not increasing. In fact, because of the pandemic, a lot of them are being laid off, terminated. Close to now, we have close to 4 million people who are unemployed due to this pandemic COVID-19 crisis. So of course, they will have a very hard time whether paying the mortgage or whether owning or renting a house. So this has become crisis of late, and this is something that need to be looked at carefully, especially after the pandemic is over, so that people will at least, people can afford to own a house, if not sooner but later. And the other critical aspect that is facing by a lot of people in Malaysia is the household debt has ballooned, driven by mortgage, because when the prices of house are very expensive, it puts a tremendous burden on the ability of people to pay back their mortgage. And because of the high cost of living, especially in the urban areas, and coupled with the fact that the other food prices are also increased, and the standard of living is also increased. So it really puts a tremendous burden on people to continue to have a very decent life. And by decent, I mean the ability to own a house is something which is very, very critical. So if you cannot own a house because the price is unaffordable, then it really puts a strain on a lot of people, especially those who are living in the urban areas. And this has really affected the ability of our country to achieve the SDG, one of the SDG goals. And this is also part of the other goal, accelerating human capital development. Try to speed up. Pursuing green. So green technology is something which is also critical. Sustainable consumption and production, conserving natural resources for present and future generation. I'm sure probably we have a lot more younger audience here tonight, and I'm sure they will be very interested in making sure that the world that we live in today, will be left intact without any destruction. So that for them to continue enjoy a healthy and living life, they have to have a green environment in the future. And it is the responsibility of our countries today, of our leaders today, to make sure that the world that we will leave behind is something which is very green and good and sustainable for our future generation. So I'm not going to talk a lot because my time is very close. So I'll just pass through something. Infrastructure is also something, coverage digital infrastructure. I'll be talking about that a little bit. This is 3 issues in terms of digital technology, digital divide in Malaysia. We are very fortunate because government has given a lot of commitment, spent a lot of money, and put a lot of efforts to make sure that we become a digital society. In fact, the progress is very, very good. In terms of accessibility, we have 81.2% mobile broadband penetration rate, which is close to 134%. So there is a slight gap in the use of internet between men and women. Men are more likely to use than women. But our gender, we have a very good gender responsive broadband policy. We are not discriminating anybody in terms of broadband policy. Yet, at the same time, of course, older people are still struggling to cope with digital technology. And yes, we still some problem with accessibility of internet access, especially in Borneo, Sabah and Sarawak, because of the location is very far and some of them are very remote. So sometimes, the ability to get internet access there is very, very difficult. Yet affordability is probably not the issue for citizens in Malaysia, because many mobile plans are very affordable. So it's not a barrier. Applicability, Malaysian are quite used to using internet, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. The data shows that 14 GB data use every month, to browse through internet. And in fact, with the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of education sector is something that has been a focus lately. And a lot of learning that is taking place is now through online, and not only at the primary level, secondary, but tertiary level. The initial plan was last time when government devised the internet policies for Malaysia to become a digital society. And fortunately, with the pandemic, there are certain unfortunate things, but there is also a fortunate thing that with the pandemic, government is able to speed up the process of making sure that people use online transaction, online facilities, not only for shopping, but also for other transaction. And Alhamdulillah, I think education is one sector in which online transaction or online learning has been very, very fast. A lot more people are using online like what we are doing now. So it is a blessing in disguise, even though country is facing pandemic, but at the same time, people have started to use internet as the primary option to search for and seek for knowledge. So economic growth, I will pass that. Transforming public service, yes, we have done that a lot in our country. A lot of reforms in a lot of agencies. And okay, poverty, hunger, yes, incident of poverty has dropped tremendously in Malaysia, even though there's still a small percentage of people who are living under the hardcore poor, but government has done a lot to make sure that we try to uplift the standard of living among people, and a lot more program and subsidies are given to make sure that people try to live from the poverty cycle, by giving them a lot of programs, entrepreneurial programs, trainings to make sure that they can sustain their life without having to depend on government subsidies in the future. So education is achieving universal and equitable education is, I think, quite understandable, similar to a lot of countries. We are very committed, and it is also part of our constitution that requires education, compulsory education for all. Economic growth, reduce inequalities. This is also talked about that earlier. Sustainable cities and communities. environmental aspect, like what our friend from Chile has indicated earlier. This is something probably that need to be focused in terms of conservation, restoration, sustainable use of terrestrial, inland, freshwater ecosystem, forest, wetland, mountain, dry land, with haze issue that is facing in Indonesia, spreading to Malaysia, Singapore, and a lot of countries. We have to put together to make sure that haze is not something that can affect a lot of people, because as of right now, there is no clear solution to the haze issue. So what are the challenges? Let me talk a little bit briefly. Environmental concern is still very high on our agenda. Reducing income gap between economic classes and ethnic group. Food security, which is also another important topic in Sustainable Development Goal. And in fact, for our country, we imported nearly 50 billion ringgit in 2018. So this is something that we have to pay attention to. Unemployment is also another issue. Universal healthcare coverage. What we have learned so far with the global and domestic crisis, economic slowdown have forced us to reprioritize its strategies. And what the government is doing now, although it costs a lot of money, but government has no choice except to provide more subsidies to the affected group, target group, those who are barely affected by this COVID-19 crisis. And this is the future. We have to mobilize resources, collaborate with all related government agencies, and focus on investment strategies. And finally, because Malaysia, like Indonesia, like Chile, we have abundance of natural resources that could help us spur in terms of achieve whatever goal that we decide to achieve. Unfortunately, we have to make sure that we have to pay attention to all these natural resources, because we don't want it to be a curse. Because some countries, they don't really manage their resources properly, and it backfire. And deforestation, sometimes cause a lot of problem to the countries. And also we are also probably not doing a lot, but government is on the right track to develop proposal to combat forest clearance haze and to address illegal logging, health, safety, and human rights of migrant workers in palm oil industry still remain a problem. So all in all, the central challenge for us as we face the SDG era will be able to find a path to grow that does not sacrifice, this is the key word, that does not sacrifice the health and welfare of individuals and the environment. As we strive, Malaysia has been very committed to achieve a developed nation status by the year 2020. Probably we have to backtrack that a little bit, probably 2022. But as we strive hard to achieve a developed status, we cannot really forget that the health and welfare of individuals and environment are at stake. So as we move forward towards achieving SDG goals, we have to make sure that everyone in the country is giving proper attention, proper care, so that at the end of the day, no one will be left behind as the country attempts to achieve the SDG goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Martadha. And I agree in that some countries also experiencing drawbacks in dealing with the SDGs due to the pandemic. But you offer the systematic solution that already implement in Malaysia, and hopefully all of us can also learn from your presentation. Thank you for clear and concise presentation. Now we continue to the third presenter. We'll have Dr. Andre Garner of University of Wyoming, and he will present about U.S. presidential election that become the hot topics in couple of days and still inviting controversy. So, Dr. Garner, the screen is yours.
Oh, let me get my screen. Here we go. Whoop, come on.
Okay. Make it full screen, Andrew.
Yes. Is that good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hello, selamat pagi. Selamat pagi dan selamat malam. Terima kasih untuk invitasi. Mohon maaf, bahasa Indonesia saya kurang baik. Good morning, good evening. Thank you for the invitation. It's very nice to be here. I'm very honored to be able to talk with everybody. It's great to see some old friends, Pak Teguh, Pak Ghulam, and all the others, and to hear this fascinating and very informative research from Chile, from Malaysia, Indonesia, and so forth. So just again, thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different direction. I'm going to talk about the US presidential election, which does have implications for sustainable development. Obviously, the two candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, differ dramatically on their positions on environmental regulations. And so the outcome of the election has some implications for environmental regulations in the US at least. So I'm going to start basically, and sort of the broad topic here is democracy in the United States. And what does the presidential election and the continuing controversy tell us about the state of democracy? So if you look at turnout, this has been the highest turnout in any presidential election since 1908. Right now, they're still counting the votes. California and some of the states on the West Coast are slow to count all of their votes. Those heavily favor Joe Biden, but they're still being counted. But the projected turnout, the best guess that we have right now about where turnout will be is 66.7%, which is very low by Indonesian standards, but is very high by American standards. Total, that's about 152 million voters, might be as many as 155 million voters when it's all said and done. So the current results as they stand right now is that Joe Biden has about 50.9% of the vote. Donald Trump has about 47.3% of the vote. As you can see, that's about 306 electoral college votes for Biden and about 232 for Trump if the results hold, and we think they will. You only need 270 electoral college votes to win the presidency. These states that are in dark blue, these are states that Donald Trump won in 2016 that Joe Biden has flipped, or he's changed the outcome. These are the ones that went for Biden but went for Trump. These three up here are not really a surprise that they flipped. Arizona's was close, but it was expected to go blue. Georgia, which is, I should say, is my home state. This is where I'm at right now in Wyoming, and this is where I was originally from. This is where I grew up. And Georgia was a surprise, especially since Florida did not flip. Typically what you see is Florida and North Carolina swing every election. So it's strange that they went for Trump this year, but Georgia did not. We're still trying to figure out exactly why. There's a strong voter registration effort by a former governor candidate named Stacey Abrams, who registered 800,000, mostly minority voters in Georgia. So we think that might have had an effect. Despite this outcome, obviously, most of you know that Donald Trump has refused to concede. And he's not just refusing to concede, he's refusing to allow Joe Biden to start the transition process. There's about $6 million in federal funds that are available to the incoming president to help with the transition. The transition just simply being that, you know, when Joe Biden and his people take over, that you can have that the administration, the executive branch is ready for the changes in policy that will come. So that has not been released, and Donald Trump and the current administration is taking a lot of actions to try to keep Biden from having a smooth transition. So how are they doing this, and where does the controversy stand right now? I want to talk about two different strategies that Donald Trump is pursuing. There's a legal strategy and there's a political strategy. And the reason I want to talk about these two separately is they have very different implications for the state of democracy in America right now. We'll start with the legal strategy. Not to be too blunt, but just being honest here and objective, Trump's legal strategy is laughably cartoonish. And when I say laughable, what I mean is that they filed dozens of lawsuits, and in at least 2 of them, the judge has literally laughed at their lawyers' arguments. That's how weak they are. And they've lost, and now the slide says they've lost every court case. That is actually now technically not true. They finally won a court case last night, but it's not going to change the outcome of any state, let alone the election. The reason that it's laughably cartoonish is that it's being led by some pretty prominent conspiracy theorists. Obviously, Rudy Giuliani was just named as the head of Trump's legal team. He has been floating a lot of conspiracy theories and hoaxes, and you probably do not recognize this other person up here. This is a man named L. Lynn Wood. He is a lawyer in Atlanta. He is Atlanta being the capital city of Georgia. And so he's filing lawsuits in Georgia, but he is a very prominent conspiracy theorist as well, and has some news reports have him promoting the QAnon conspiracy theory, if you know what that is. QAnon is a very dangerous conspiracy theory, almost like a cult, that the FBI, the federal government, has labeled a domestic terrorist threat. And I'm going to circle back to that and why highlight L. Lynn Wood's role in Trump's legal strategy. But what happens is that Giuliani, Wood, and others go on television and out in public and make these broad claims, sweeping claims of extensive voter fraud. They're claiming that there's widespread voter fraud that gave the election to Joe Biden. The problem is that when they get to court, they can't show the evidence because there is no evidence. And so that's why all of these court cases are getting tossed out, because the claims that they're making in public, when they get to court, they don't have the evidence to back it up. Now, I say all that to make this point. I am as certain about the outcome of this as I am about anything. Trump's legal strategy will fail. The states are going to certify that Joe Biden won and Joe Biden will be the next president. So the legal strategy is weak and it will not fail. And I think the implication of this is that it points to democracy in America still being strong and still pointing to us being a stable democracy. If you look at the courts have not become so corrupted that they will ignore evidence and hand the outcome to the side that they want. They are still bound by law. There's still the rule of law in this country, and the courts are adhering to the rule of law. And because of that, Trump has very, very little ability to overturn the election in a legal way. So that's the good news. The bad news is when you look at the political strategy. This is where things take a very disturbing turn. Trump is, and his supporters are out there just rampantly promoting hoaxes and conspiracies, especially on social media. The things they're putting out there, and I'll show you some examples of this, are outrageous, they're ludicrous, they have no basis in evidence, but they're widespread. And his supporters are sharing it on Facebook, and Facebook and Twitter are unable, or they're just not willing to stop it. Before the election, the social media companies made very bold claims, very strong claims that they were not going to allow the president or his supporters to undermine the legitimacy of the election. The problem is they've not upheld that. They have allowed the president and his supporters to spread these conspiracy theories. And again, Trump and a lot of Republicans, a lot of Republican senators, Republican members of Congress, governors are spreading these hoaxes as well. So this is not simply Donald Trump in isolation or his supporters. This is the Republican Party, a lot of members of the Republican Party, including prominent leaders, who are out there spreading things that they know are wrong. things that they know are false. They're lying, not to be too blunt about it. And I'm going to talk about this last point in a second. They're also attacking other Republicans. So the few Republicans who are willing to stand up and refute the lies are getting attacked by Trump and the other Republicans. So when you look at the politics of this and sort of the public messaging, it gets really disturbing. So these are a small collection of tweets, and if you look at the timestamps, I collected these last night. This is not even all of the false statements Trump has made on Twitter. This is a small sample of them in the last 24 hours alone. And so you can see what Twitter is doing. Trump said, "I won the election," and Twitter puts this little message, "Official sources called this election differently." And you can see all of the little tags that they have on there. And here's Trump retweeting Rudy Giuliani about, widespread voter fraud. This is why I say that social media is unwilling or cannot stop it. A lot of Trump supporters will see this warning label and will use that as an excuse to believe that it's true. I've seen Trump supporters and on Facebook, some of people I know on Facebook will say things like, "Well, if Twitter says it's false, that's how you know it's true." So what Trump and Republicans a lot of Republicans have been able to do is to turn these warnings and these, the warnings that the tweets are false into a reason to believe the falsehoods, which is kind of perverse if you think about it. So the social media efforts to combat this have been very weak and very ineffective. These warning labels do not stop people from believing it, and they're not willing to take down, to delete, or to stop Trump from spreading these lies. Now let's talk about Republicans attacking other Republicans. In Georgia, which flipped blue but was very close election. The difference, I believe, last I looked was about 15,000 votes, less than 0.5% difference. For background, the Secretary of State, each state has a Secretary of State, and it's typically the Secretary of State that administers the elections in America. And in Indonesia, this will be the equivalent of the KPU. But whereas the KPU is a national organization, each state has its own office for that. The Secretary of State, unlike the KPU, is an elected position, and it's a partisan position. So the people who oversee the administering of the election are partisan elected officials. In Georgia, which is typically a very Republican state, the Secretary of State is Republican. He came out and he confirmed that there was no fraud in the Georgia elections. Rudy Giuliani, Ellen Wood, and Trump supporters have been going around saying there's fraud in Georgia and that Trump actually won. The Republican Secretary of State basically said that actually did call one of them a liar. So he's saying they're lies. Nonetheless, Trump and his supporters have been attacking him on Facebook. And the attacks have gotten so bad that last night, the Secretary of State announced that he and his family have been receiving death threats and threats of violence from Trump supporters for simply counting the vote. That's one example. Another example is in Philadelphia. Now, even though the Secretary of State for each state oversees the election statewide, each locality, county, or city also has a commissioner or a chair who oversees the counting of the vote in that area. So Philadelphia is a city in Pennsylvania, another contested state that went for Biden this year, but Trump won in 2016. He's also Republican. His name's Al Schmidt. He's also Republican, and he also confirmed that there's no fraud in Philadelphia. Nonetheless, Trump and his supporters want to perpetuate this hoax and this conspiracy theory that there's widespread fraud, so they've been attacking him. And he's also received death threats against him, his office, and his family. So let me give you a quote from Al Schmidt about this, and then I'll kind of back up and talk about why this is so disturbing. So this is what he said in an interview on 60 Minutes, which is where the picture's from. He said that from the inside looking out, it all feels very deranged. At the end of the day, we are counting eligible votes cast by voters. The controversy surrounding it is something I don't understand. It's people just coming up with all sorts of crazy stuff. And he reported that one of Trump's supporters told his office, quote, "This is what the Second Amendment is for, people like you." The Second Amendment, just for background, is the part of the US Constitution that guarantees the right to own guns. That's a death threat. That is a Trump supporter basically saying, we're going to shoot you. And that's not an isolated case. That is becoming much more common. So let me back up a second, kind of lay out the situation. What you have is a complete lack of evidence of voter fraud. And this is, we know there's a lack of evidence because every time Trump and his lawyers go to court, they have to admit that they don't have evidence. But in public, on Facebook, social media, and on television, they're out there making these sweeping claims that they can't support. And they're making the claims and pressuring other Republicans to go along with their lies and their hoaxes and their conspiracies. And the few Republicans that will not go along with it, like the Secretary of State in Georgia, like the Philadelphia City Commissioner, Trump supporters are going around harassing them, attacking them, and in some cases, threatening them with violence or even death. So the situation on the political side is turning very ugly. More broadly, there have been some protests. The largest one was recently in Washington, D.C. over the last couple of days. It involved Trump supporters in the streets literally fighting with Biden supporters. I don't mean pushing and shoving. I mean, one person got stabbed, 20 other people went to the hospital. And before the election, you also saw some of this violence where 2 people were actually shot in Wisconsin by a 17-year-old who took a rifle to the protest. So again, this violence and this chaos and this unrest, civil unrest, has been growing. It was happening before the election and it's still happening. And probably most disturbingly, there are at least, and I say at least because these are the 2 we know of, at least 2 domestic terrorist plots that were stopped by police related to the election. The picture down here shows a Humvee or a Hummer. 2 men loaded that vehicle up with firearms, with rifles and pistols, and were driving to a place where they were counting the ballots. And the prosecutor, fortunately, the police caught them before they were able to do this, but the prosecutor said that basically their intention was to go and shoot the people counting the ballots. So what we have is actual domestic terrorism. Thankfully, none of them have been successful. You have widespread protests, you have violence, you have threats against elected officials, all because Donald Trump and a large number of Republican elected officials are running around spreading these conspiracy theories and these hoaxes. They're stirring up the anger and the fear in their base, and some of their supporters are turning violent as a result. Unfortunately, again, it's getting worse. The hoaxes, the conspiracies are spreading all over social media. I have personally seen people on Facebook, one member of my family, but then also some of friends on Facebook talking about civil war. It's, that's the level of heated rhetoric that is out there. Very few Republicans will stand up to Donald Trump and will call him out and will basically tell the truth, which is there was no rampant fraud and Trump lost the election. And those few that do will get attacked pretty viciously by Trump supporters. And all of this is to say, the situation is eroding one of the most important democratic norms, which is that the losing party accepts the outcome. The losing party accepts the legitimacy of the election. One of the things that pro-democracy scholars tell nations all across the world, especially new democracies, is that the party that loses has to accept the legitimacy of the election and accept the outcome of the election when they lose. We call it a peaceful transfer of power. That is not happening in America. And it's not happening because one of the political parties has taken a a strategy, a political strategy of spreading conspiracies, lies, and hoaxes in an effort to keep from having to admit that they simply lost the election. So that's to say that if you look at the political side of things, it's undermining and I would even say eroding democracy in America right now. So it's sort of a mixed conclusion. If you look at the outcome on the legal side, we still have the rule of law. The courts have not been corrupted and the courts are largely being apolitical about this. And they're basing their rulings on evidence, or in this case, a lack of evidence of widespread voter fraud. But on the political side, where evidence and facts don't seem to really matter anymore, these conspiracies and hoaxes are spreading like wildfire. They're just spreading all over social media, especially social media. They're spreading all over the conservative media as well. And you're getting, it's turning violent in some cases, and in a few cases, we're actually have domestic terrorism threats that are popping up. So things are not looking so great on the political side. So that's what I want to leave you with. I'm happy to talk more about this. I don't want to take up much more time. I want to leave more time for Pak Teguh. And but again, happy to talk about this with the discussion later, but that's sort of the mixed conclusion and the state of things in America regarding democracy right now. So terima kasih, and thank you for listening.
Terima kasih, Dr. Garner, for the interesting presentation. We really sad to hear about the growing situation, but we still hope the best that democracy still can defend in the United States. Now we continue to the last but not least presenter, Dr. Yuwanto. He will share ideas about the rise of Islamic conservative politics. It's a question mark towards the consolidation of Indonesian democracy. So, Dr. Yuwanto, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Pak Ghulam. Please help me to share my PPT. Thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished participants, good evening. Thank you to the committee who invited me as one of the speakers in this such of prestigious international seminar. And also thank you for your patience and persistence. I will present a topic entitled The Rise of Islamic Conservative Politics Toward a Deconsolidation of Indonesian Democracy. I would like to start by referring to an event that happened only 7 days ago, an event that we already aware. Last week on November 10, thousands of people from the FPI, Islamic Defenders Front, welcomed their chief, Habib Rizik Shihab, home from his 3-year exile in Saudi Arabia. Rizik expressed his relief at returning to Indonesia after he fled to Saudi Arabia in 2017, when the Indonesian National Police declared him a prime suspect in a pornography case. Soon after his arrival, he said to his followers near his home in Petamburan district, "If Allah has willed that I should return to Indonesia, no force can stop me." And again he said, "I have returned to call on Indonesian Muslims to join in carrying out a moral revolution." But he did not specify what he meant by his moral revolution. And indeed, earlier in the morning, the FPI paralyzed Soekarno-Hatta Airport from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. as the masses converged on Terminal 3 to await the Saudi Airlines flight taking him home. The police said the mob cut off access to the airport. This is the most recent picture of the mass activity of conservative Islamic groups. Dear participant, many scholars of Indonesian politics have asserted that Indonesia is currently undergoing a conservative turn, especially among its Muslim population. One scholar, for example, argued that the rise of conservative Islamic forces has deep and pervasive consequences for Indonesian politics, and it comprises a phenomena that has a long-term impact on Indonesia's future. And also Marcus Metzner, for example, even posits that this phenomenon and the lack of proper response from the nationalist government have rendered the consolidation of Indonesian democracy. And also another pundit, Martin van Brunessen, for example, on the other hand, argues that the response will probably arrive from the traditionalist Muslim rather than through the government by the indigenization of Islam through the concept of Islam Nusantara. So how would this phenomenon play out in the national political scene? Meanwhile, long before, a study from Greg Feely, for example, noted the changing patterns of Islamic behavior in Indonesia, which gain a greater presence in social, cultural, and political life compared to the 1960s. These new patterns of behavior are evident. For example, changes in the way of dressing, increase in the number of mosques and congregations, and also regular appearances of dakwah or preaching talk shows in national television channels as well as social media platforms. Cases of religious intolerance, notably hate speech and repeated attacks against Indonesian Christians and Muslim minority sects, namely Ahmadiyya and Shia communities, started appearing regularly in the country, particularly in the later years of Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono's presidency. This phenomena displayed how deeply Islam has penetrated into the many elements of Indonesian society and has even spread into the political sphere. Probably still fresh in our memories, a series of demonstrations called the Aksi Bela Islam, Action of Defend Islam, which took place in Jakarta demanding the prosecution of former governor of Jakarta, Basuki Cahayapurnama, for his perceived blasphemy of Islam. This has become an example of religious conservatism extending to politics. Ahok's statements on Quran Al-Maidah 51 caused a stir among a large portion of Indonesian Muslims. Many members of Islamic organizations joined the rallies. The 4 November 2016 or 411 and 2 December 2016 212 demonstrations drew a huge crowd at Jakarta's Monas or National Monument. Ahok was repeatedly labeled as a kafir asing, a foreign infidel, and was subsequently sentenced to 2 years in prison for his comments. Ahok's identity as a Chinese Indonesian who also being used against him, thereby continuing the practice of racial and identity politics in Indonesian politics. Marcus Metzner and Burhanuddin Muhtadi once studied the political consequence of such phenomena. Their survey-based study revealed a correlation between religious devoutness and voting behavior. Many of those who identified themselves as devout Muslims opted to vote against Ahok despite being satisfied with his performance. The people behind the demonstration later called themselves the 212 movement, Gerakan 212, with the founder of Islamic Defenders Front, or FPI, Rizik Sihab, as its leader. The group also aimed to replicate the success of Gerakan 212 in toppling Ahok at the national level by ousting Jokowi in the last year presidential elections. The continued smear campaigns, particularly to delegitimize Jokowi's Islamic credential, seems targeted towards the incumbent. The trend of conservatism did not show any deterioration following the 2019 general election. So the battle between Jokowi and Prabowo Subianto was marred by rampant use of identity politics, particularly among the Muslim population. So rising conservatism of Indonesian Muslim can be seen as one of the enabling factors for the flourishing identity politics. Ladies and gentlemen, let me shorten this presentation, and actually in my area now is hard rain falls, yeah, so it is a little bit noisy. So in short, the increased role of conservative groups in Indonesian electoral politics took roots during the Bolshevik proceedings against Jakarta's former Governor Ahok in 2016 and the ensuing Jakarta gubernatorial election in 2017. And also worth noting that while it is doubtful whether the participant of the Aksi Bela Islam rally in 2017 actually support the establishment of an Islamic country, but the event testifies to the consolidation of the Islamic conservative movement in Indonesia. The demonstration articulated the strength of the Islamic movement and its ability to mobilize the masses in defense of its interests. The event may have been attended by Jakartans from a mixture of background, but it sent a message to Muslim groups that mass gatherings are an effective means of advancing their political demands. Dear participants, now I come to last part of this presentation. Yeah, it is related the question, yeah, is those phenomena towards the consolidation of Indonesian democracy. What is important in this regard is the way that administration of Indonesia's President Jokowi has responded to the growing anti-democratic activism of Islamist groups. Jokowi has used an approach of both accommodation and repression to weaken the influence of conservative Muslim leaders and the consolidation of the Islamic Populist Alliance. Meanwhile, Jokowi has also introduced a number of repressive measures. Some pro-democracy activists, especially supporters of the government, argue that Jokowi's action, in particular his repressive approach, are an acceptable response to address the threat from the Islamic Populist Alliance. Their argument rests on what's so-called the militant democracy paradigm, which suggests that religious intolerance cannot be tolerated and democracy should defend itself against its enemy using any means necessary. Some scholars believe that such approaches, dubbed by Marcus Metzner, for example, as fighting illiberalism with illiberalism. Fighting illiberalism with illiberalism, according to him, will open the road to the deconsolidation of democracy in Indonesia. However, others, meanwhile, describe it as a symptom of Indonesia's authoritarian turn on the return of a new order. However, the approach used by the Jokowi administration is not destroying democracy. On the contrary, it is maintaining and reproducing illiberalism that makes room for the rise of Islamic conservatism in Indonesia. What I mean is that democracy in Indonesia was never liberalized or consolidated in the first place, as imagined by those scholars referred to above. Likewise, from the very beginning of his term in office in 2014, Jokowi's administration never represented the victory of pro-democratic forces over the oligarchs. This is my opinion. So with this in mind, what Jokowi did in response to the perceived Islamic threat should not be seen as the beginning of a new phase of democratic regression. Instead, it is because Indonesian democracy has already been destroyed, being fueled by money politics and predation, that there is only a limited number of options for addressing the anti-democratic activism of Islamic Populist Alliance. Metzner, for example, once again admits that all imaginable approaches, whether repressive, accommodative, or combination of the two, just as Jokowi's were, are not effective in weakening the Islamist threat. The high number of votes gained by the Islamist Prosperous Justice Party atau Partai Keadilan Sejahtera, for example, shows that repressive measures have indeed fueled the anger of conservative Muslims and so helped to consolidate their movement. Meanwhile, the accommodative approach, as seen in the appointment of Kiai Ma'ruf Amin and the alliance with other Islamic groups that represent moderate Muslims, has made the exclusionary religious narrative even more pronounced in public life. And the percentage of votes gained by each candidate in 2019 presidential election has not changed much compared with the 2014 results, affirming the ineffectiveness of Jokowi's approach in undermining the influence of Islamists. But that is exactly the problem, in the sense that there are only three options for addressing Islamic radicalism and religious intolerance, which threatens the very survival of liberal democracy. And indeed, since the destruction of the left, or in 1965, well known as PKI, that paved the way for the emergence of the 32 years rule of an authoritarian regime. There are only two main sources of mobilization: nationalism and religion-based politics. Meanwhile, political parties have long been detached from their social basis. Consequently, since the beginning of the post-authoritarian era, political mobilization in electoral contests relies heavily on money politics and the politicization of religious and ethnic sentiments. What we see today, therefore, regarding the rivalry between ultra-nationalist elements and the Islamic Conservative Alliance is the legacy of the political reality post-1965, which is not at all surprising. And similarly, what Jokowi did in response to to Islamics does not mark the beginning of an authoritarian term or beginning of democratic deconsolidation. In my opinion, it does only accentuate the illiberal tendency of Indonesian democracy. So that's all my presentation. Yeah, we can continue in Q&A session. Thank you very much. Back to moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Yuwanto, for your interesting presentation. And I think the last two presentation bring the same message about the movement that become a threat for democracy. And now we still have a couple of minutes, and now time for question and answer. I think we have a question for Professor Martadha already on the chat room, and also two questions, I think, for Dr. Garner. And just before I give the time for the presenter to answer based on the question on chat, the participant may raise the hand for asking directly to the presenter, please. If you'd like to give the question or maybe respond to the presentation. If no, then I will go to Professor Martadha, because we have a question, I think, Professor, from Joko Isdianto. It's about how the ways of Malaysian government overcome the main obstacle of SDGs implementation in Malaysia when the political and social condition is not stable or is unstable. Professor Martadha, please.
Thank you, Pak. Okay, the question, how the ways of the Malaysian government is to overcome the main obstacles of SDG implementation when the political and social condition is unstable. Okay, so question is interesting. Of course, like what I have discussed earlier, the implementation of SDGs will depend pretty much upon the situation of the country. And like I have mentioned earlier, also because of the pandemic, COVID-19 crisis, a lot more efforts cannot be implemented and coordinated due to the fact that a lot more resources need to be channeled and reallocated to important and critical matters. For example, a lot more people are losing their job, and businesses are going out of business. So government needs to channel a lot of financial allocation instead of to issues that were last time pertinent and important. For example, improvement of infrastructure, or putting a lot of money into government projects, in regard to development. But because of the pandemic, so government has to re-strategize its position, to make sure that people who are badly affected by the COVID-19 crisis will be helped first. And in this regard, especially people who live in the rural areas, people who lose their job, the below 40 groups, middle income 40 groups. So those people are badly affected by COVID-19 crisis. So a lot more programs, a lot more subsidies are being channeled to them. And by channeling a lot of resources and allocation to them, it means that government has to reshift its focus, from the existing programs to programs that are in need of immediate help. Therefore, of course, what we are saying is that even though government has very committed to ensure that the implementation of all the programs in regard to SDG can be achieved, and hopefully will be achieved, but because of the situation that we are facing right now, it forces the government to make sure that we have to reprioritize our money, and we have to re-strategize to make sure that we do what is critical first, and we focus on what is not critical and important later. And for programs, for the implementation of SDGs, even though we have already lined up a lot of actions, we have already lined up a lot of plans for achieving the SDGs, we might not be able to achieve those within the time frame because of the fact that what is important and critical right now is the well-being of our society, and the well-being of people at the moment is at the top of the agenda of the government. And in regard to that also, because you have also talked about political instability. Yes, Malaysian government is facing a lot of uncertainties, especially as the budget 2021 is currently being tabled. And hopefully, it can be passed without any problem, because if the budget will not be able to be passed, then the country will have a lot of problems, especially because the money will not be there. So hopefully, even if there is currently a political crisis going on, even though not to say instability, but uncertainty is pretty much the news of the day. But hopefully, with the right thinking mind of politician, what is at stake is always the well-being of the citizen. So if a politician can take that into consideration, try to make sure that budget will be passed without any problem. So hopefully the country will be on the right track again, not only to get out from the COVID-19 crisis, but most importantly to make sure the well-being of the citizens are being taken care of. And most importantly, what all the plans that the government have put in place, especially in terms of making sure the government will be on the right track to achieve SDGs by 2030, can be achieved without any problems. So hopefully, with all the situation and crisis that we are facing, social, economic, political, the most important aspect is at the moment for every country in the world, I believe, is the well-being of the citizens.
Okay, thank you, Professor Martadha. Just before to the other presenter, I think we have Pak Wijayanto here. Raise the hand. So we'd like to hear from you, Pak Wijayanto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got I actually have asked questions since the beginning, but the host mutes me, so I cannot speak. First of all, I would like to express my compliment to all speakers. Thank you all for the wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it so much and learned a lot from it. My question is directed to Dr. Andrew Garner. Hi, Andrew. Nice to meet you here. Sorry, but I missed some part of your presentation. But I noticed that perhaps you don't, as far as I follow, you don't really elaborate about the Joe Biden. Yeah. Here with me, I bring this book. I don't know whether you know this book or not. This is the book by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Z. Blood. Yeah, about how democracies in America die, and this book is written by those two Harvard professors, and basically arguing about the situation of democracy in America during Trump period, right? So my question would be, now that despite the controversy, yeah, despite the court process, this long way to go, yeah, this chaotic situation right now, let's say that it's over and Biden wins and Biden becomes the president. Are you optimistic about it? Can we say that this is the some of the Indonesian media here said that Fajar Demokrasi, the dawn of democracy in America. So it's a new hope for America. Are you that optimistic about Joe Biden? Because I noticed that some friends, see Joe Biden and Trump as like Prabowo and Jokowi in the second period. So both of them are not so promising. So I really would like to know from you, what do you think about it? That would be my first question. And the second one would be, you mentioned about hoax, right? And the spread of hoax and its speech, perhaps, yeah. In America during the campaign, in Indonesia, we really pay, and the price is really, really, really much, yeah. This price us too much because after the campaign, we have our society is divided into two sections. We call it Jokowi followers and Prabowo followers. Yeah, Cebong and Kampret. Those are two animals actually. Yeah, bat and the frog. Before Prabowo is now inside the cabinet as well. Yeah, joins the cabinet as a minister of defense. But before that, the situation, our society is really divided, and the situation is quite nasty. So the cost of hoax and hate speech during campaign, black campaign, the cost is, we have to suffer it beyond the election. Do you think the U.S. will experience the same thing? Because now some people say that the United States is not the example of a good democracy anymore, and Indonesia should not learn from them anymore. And one joke say that now United States learn from us how to do politics, right? So that would be my question. Thank you. Thank you, Pak Ghulam.
Thank you, Pak Wija. And the both question goes to Dr. Garner, and also another two questions that already in the chat room for Dr. Garner. So now
can I ask Ghulam?
Oh yeah, of course. Please.
Yes.
Please, Pak Teguh. Yeah.
Thank you, Pak Ghulam. My first question is to Prof. Martadha. Prof, when we are talking about democracy and welfare, democracy and sustainable development, do you believe that there is a strong relation between democracy and welfare. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think Malaysia is not a country which excellent democracy, but I think you can make a good performance in economy or in welfare. So my question to Prof. Martadha is then whether do you believe in the context of Malaysia and the democracy has a strong relation to welfare? My second question to my good friend that I miss you so much, Andrew, because I should be planned to visit you. If no pandemic, I think I was in Laramie. So Andrew, I just have a simple question to you. You are saying that the turnout of this election for the president is very high, 66 point something. This is the story of the good story of political participation in the US. And you know this.
I think Pak Teguh experiencing drop in the connection.
Yes, trouble.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we skip it, and then it goes to Dr. Garner to answer the question. I know 3 from the direct question and also 2 from the chat room. So, Dr. Garner, the screen is yours.
Thank you for the questions. I think I can address several of them at the same time. First of all, Pak Teguh and Pak Ghulam and Pak Yuwanto, I miss all of you. Miss all my friends at Semarang. I wish that y'all would that y'all could come out here. Wish I could come there. Cannot tell you how much I miss tempeh goreng. The tempeh vignette. That's one of my favorite things ever. So let me start off with the book How Democracy Dies. It's a fantastic book. They get so much of it right. What we're seeing, one part of that book that I think goes unnoticed is that if you look around the world, the situation that is most likely for a democracy to die, to revert to authoritarianism, is when you have a presidential system like ours, where you have a president that's elected separately from Congress, and you have very polarized parties. What happens is you have gridlock. Democrats control the House, Republicans controlled the Senate and the presidency until recently. And the two sides, and you add to that a national crisis, and the two sides cannot come together to solve the national crisis. The public puts pressure on the executive to start taking extra constitutional measures, authoritarian measures. So am I optimistic about Biden? No, unfortunately I'm not. Biden is pro-democracy. He is supporting democracy right now, but the system itself is part of the problem. And what we're seeing is the system breaking. And it's been trending this direction for 40 years. Specifically in the United States, it's presidents using what's called executive orders. These have the force of law, but are not passed by Congress. Normally you need Congress to pass and the president sign. Well, the president signs the executive order to do what Congress won't let him. You see an increased use of that started with Reagan, increased it, then Bush, then Clinton, and Bush, then Obama as well. And now, Donald Trump just kind of kicked the door open to using executive orders and these extra constitutional measures. That's why I'm not terribly optimistic, because the forces that have been, creating this strain on our system predate Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a consequence of the trends in polarization. We have the two parties that are so far apart on policy and ideology, and you fold onto that what we call negative partisanship, which is not supporting your party, but hating the other side. So you have two parties that are very far apart on policy and literally hate each other, are not talking to each other, and are openly attacking each other. That's a situation where neither side can get along. And so when you have divided government, which we have, very little is going to get done. I would be more optimistic if the Republicans had come out early and accepted the outcome of the elections and promised to work with Biden where they can agree. That's not happening, and there's I have maybe some optimistic that maybe Biden can reach across the aisle to some Republicans in the Senate to pass legislation, but the incentives that are there are still there. They're going to be there after Biden leaves office. Is going to have to take depolarization, the two sides cranking down the rhetoric, turning down the heat, and working with each other. And that's going to require that both sides stop demonizing the other, stop casting the other side in terms of evil and dangerous, right? So that's the bad news. I'm sorry, I did not write down your question about hoaxes. I think if I remember correctly, you were asking about, are they going to continue to spread?
So my question is actually, you just explained it right just now. The impact, the effect of using hoax and hate speech. The impact of using hoax and hate speech to our political opponent is too expensive. So after the election, the hatred between the two followers and the two elites even is still going on and still lasts after the election. And you just answered it just now, right now, that it has an impact to the that the president looks like hostage. Yeah, he cannot really do what he wants because the Senate will stop him from doing it. So yeah, actually you have answered it. This like a situation in Asia, not exactly the same, but more or less the same. After the election, the hatred between the elites and also the followers are still still going on, and we all have to pay the price for that.
Yep. And the price, just so we're all clear, the price is in delegitimizing of government and undermining of democracy. Yeah. Let me also, to address Dr. Gu's question, which he cut out on us, but talked about the higher turnout. And on the surface, we look at that and we say, oh, that's great. That's, people are participating. We want that democracy. The problem is that why are they participating? They're participating because they hate the other side. And this goes to the question in the chat, right? What decreased Trump's popularity? Well, his behavior, and he was never a popular president. He came into office with the lowest approval ratings in modern history. So he was never very popular. So some of it was his behavior. His response to COVID-19 also caused a lot of voters to switch. He had, the economy sort of started coming back, and so that was good for him. But mostly it was his personality and COVID. The reason so many Democrats turned out, though, is because they hate Donald Trump. And the reason so many Republicans turned out is they hate the Democrats. So the things that drive up turnout is not, oh, I really support my party. It's, I really don't like the other side. And that's what's causing these tensions and this, frankly, these hoaxes. And then one last very quick thing about these hoaxes. I don't know if you've heard about QAnon, but we'll see what happens with QAnon now that Biden won the election. But that is a very dangerous, I would even call it a cult. I don't think that's too strong of a term. You have a Republican member of Congress who was elected supporting QAnon. If you don't know what QAnon is, basically, they believe that Democrats are led by Satan-worshiping pedophiles who are torturing and killing children and drinking their blood. And that may sound ridiculous, but we have a sitting member of Congress who actually believes that. If you believe that about the other side, you cannot work with the other side. And by the way, QAnon also calls for the literal execution of Democrats, like literally jailing them and executing them. And Donald Trump's son has tweeted out QAnon memes, and Donald Trump has retweeted QAnon supporters. So that's the level of vitriol and hatred that has become part of the mainstream political discourse in our country. This isn't some fringe on the internet. This is a sitting member of Congress and the president's son. And by the way, the scariest part for me, this is the former national security advisor, the top national security position. Michael Flynn is also a supporter of QAnon. So this is becoming mainstream. And so that's, I'll leave off there. Oh, hey. Hello. Hello. So I'll leave off there. And if I didn't get to all of the questions, and I apologize, and I'll be happy to answer them, but I want to leave more time for the other speakers. So thank you.
My question, Andrew. Ghulam, bisa jawab pertanyaan Ghulam?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Garner. And just before we move to Dr. Yuwanto, because you have one question, we will go to Professor Martadha for the question from Pak Teguh.
Yeah, Pak Teguh, very interesting question that you have raised. Whether there is a strong relation between democracy and welfare. And as far as Malaysia is concerned, Malaysia has always been a guided democracy. We are not a full-fledged democracy. We have been from a long time ago, been very guided. So we tend to control a lot of aspects in our democracy. Even comparing Malaysia and Indonesia, Indonesia is a very vibrant and dynamic democracy, whereas Malaysia is not.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't.
But you more welfare, yeah?
Yeah. So I think more or less we are closely aligned. If you were to say more socialist, rather than full-fledged democracy.
Liberalist,
Because I think the main consideration of all governments that are in place is always about the well-being of the people. So many of the policies of the government tend to be very populist policies, not trying to please the citizen, providing a lot more subsidies, providing a lot more assistance, financial assistance,
social policies,
Yes. So rather than full-fledged and vibrant democracy like Indonesia, I think Malaysia is more similar to Singapore in that nature, where we tend to have a very controlled democracy,
Okay.
Thank you,
Prof.
Thank you very much. Martadha. And Dr. Yuwanto, are you still with us?
Okay, thank you. There is a question from Sinta, student of Diponegoro University. I read this question like this. I have a question for Mr. Yuwanto regarding the topic he brought about the rise of Islamic conservative politics. We all know that there were many stakeholders and conservative figures involved in Aksi 212, not only Habib Rizik Shihab in particular. Hence, why does at the end Rizik Shihab become the strongest one to appear and actually have a huge influence in politics up until now, even after all the scandals he faced in the past that made him living in Indonesia for more than 3 years. He is still spotted by a lot of people looking forward to knowing the answer. Thank you. Okay, so in my opinion, Rizik was not a part of a formal political group or party. However, he became a figure who could influence the opinion of others and be strengthened by his supporters. And also, Sinta, I see him as a social movement itself. FPI is a social movement in which, in certain moments, Habib Rizik Sihab can become a solidarity maker, then become an opinion leader. His capacity as an opinion leader can help a politician position to boost support, of course. In addition, sympathizers who are so militant are also a reason, because Rizik is considered capable of gathering his supporters in one command. So I think this is my observation, and at least organization, vigilante organization like FPI needs a prominent figure, need a symbol, and Rizik Sihab has this necessity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yuwanto, for the answer. And sadly, we have limited time, but the discussion, I think, is getting hotter in terms of the election, political behavior in many cases. But we have to finish right now. Just before the closing, I would like to invite Vice Dean of Academic and Student Affairs for the concluding remark, Dr. Teguh Yuwono. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Pak Ghulam. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to appreciate to all of participants who I think ready to study and to pay attention for the presentation until a little bit night, in Malaysia and in Indonesia. But for Andrew, I think it's very morning, very early in the morning in Laramie. Very early in the morning, and I think very cold, Andrew, now. I think because the highest temperature when I was there is about 5 or 10 degree Celsius, very cold. I know this is the topic is a little bit heavier, and there are a lot of interesting debate around the themes and what already presented by Dr. Fernando, Professor Martadha, Dr. Garner, and also Pak Yuwanto, Ph.D., and also many participants who already asked to the speaker. I would like to appreciate for all of your contribution. And I do hope, for me actually, if everything is going well and then the pandemic is already finished, I think I also have made an appointment with Prof. Martadha to visit UUM. But unfortunately, we have to visit online from our own homes. And I also miss Andrew's home, I think. Is it your new house, Andrew, when you're going back from Indonesia? Still the one that I visited last year? Still the one or new one, Andrew?
No, it's the same. It's the same.
Oh, still the same. That is why I'm not so what do you call it? I'm not so strange your what do you call it? Your rooms, because I have been there. Yes, yeah. So
new office.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you very much, and I think I'm very happy to have you. And also, I think also I have already asked Tom, I think 2 months ago. So Tom also already came to this webinar. Thank you very much, Andrew, for your wonderful and greatest contribution to us. Prof. Martadha, once again, thank you very much. Pak Yuwanto, also thank you very much. Mas Ghulam, as a moderator, you have done your job very well. Thank you very much. And then Dr. Fernando also. Once again, on behalf of the faculty, I would like to say thank you, and I close this webinar officially. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So this concludes the webinar, and thank you for all the speakers and the participants. Hopefully we learn and enjoy this presentation, and I do hope in the future we can have offline seminar or workshop together, whether in
Laramie
or in
Malaysia.
Thank you for everyone. Have a wonderful time.
Okay.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, what about the weather now? Andrew, is now very cold, or?
Yeah, it's we're gonna have a lot of snow this weekend, so it's going to be.
So now it's the winter, or is it winter or winter? In the middle of the winter, or almost done, almost finished?
Beginning.
Oh, beginning.
Yeah. We'll have a lot of snow for the next 6 months.
But you're learning in the UWs also online teaching, something like that, or already offline or mixed?
I'm online only, but they tried in person and then they went back online because there's an outbreak. So Wyoming's become a hot spot.
But you are saying that in Laramie, in Wyoming, is not many students, so you can come to the campus because not many students there. So you can make offline, right?
We can. That is correct. I've been staying away though. Unfortunately, Wyoming is a hot spot now. Our numbers are just it's sad.
But you remember, you promised me to go to go fishing, yeah?
Yes. Next time you come, catch
you promised me that. Okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Prof Martadha.
Ya, Pak. Ya,
terima kasih, Prof.
Ya, sama. Thank you very much, Pak. Insyaallah kita ketemu.
If everything all right, I promise you I will visit you there in
me too. I want to
Semarang.
visit Diponegoro.
Yes, because very close, maybe only 1 hour by plane.
Yes, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Thank
you very much.
Okay, see you then.
Stay safe. Assalamualaikum.
Andrew, wassalam. See you. Terima kasih.